So I'm starting to think there may be a problem with guys named John T. So if you're a John T or dating a John T, you might want to be careful. I have a big problem with a John T from my past, and if you don't know about that, you need to read my book. If you hadn't read my book, it's Stop Waiting to Die, available on Amazon. I'm in the hotel waiting for Wes. Two John T's at Holly Hedges. John T. Scott, the one who built it. Unless I can find a way to show there's a mistaken identity, he clearly skipped out on a wife and 5 children who were alive when he left Scotland. Same year, 1792, that he married Susanna Miller in Natchez. That doesn't sound good. And number 2, no, well, 3, I guess, John T. in my world, 2 of Holly Hedges is John T. McMurran Jr. The original John McMurran, who built Melrose and who lived at Holly Hedges, was a very well-respected attorney, good guy, honorable guy. John T. Jr., not so much. So the builders of the famous home Melrose in Natchez. Melrose is so famous, it is owned now by the federal government. It's preserved as one of the finest examples of Southern architecture, particularly because it has been sold intact year after year. It was built by John and Mary McMurran. They lived in Melrose 17 years until the war came along and took all their money, like it did a lot of people's. But while they were building it, during their earlier years, they lived in Holly Hedges. In fact, they lived in Holly Hedges 16 years. They lived in Melrose a total of 17 years. So a lot of their life events happened in Holly Hedges. That's why I'm so interested in the McMurrans. John and Mary McMurran were lovely people by all accounts, and they had 3 children. Their first daughter, Mary Elizabeth, died before her 2nd birthday. Then they had John T. McMurran Jr., who's our problem. And then they had another daughter. And since the first one had died, they named this one also Mary Elizabeth. So Wes and I now are in the Uber, going to track down John T. Jr. Mary Elizabeth. Say hi, Wes. He's not listening. So Mary Elizabeth died at the age of 29. She did have a couple, 2, 3 children. Only one lived to adulthood. He was kind of a bit of a ne'er-do-well himself. She had married Farrar Connor, and they had several children. Only one really lived past 1 or 2 years old. And his name was Farrar Jr. He was known as Fozzie. It could be Fazy or Fozzie. I'm going with Fozzie. We don't know for sure. But Fozzie was a bit of a problem himself. Apparently he had club feet when he was born, but they operated, and apparently it was very successful surgery, and he did well, but he pretty much lived off of his grandmother, Mary McMurran, the rest of his life. Never married, never amounted to anything particularly, which brings us to John T. So John T. Jr. and Allie had 4 daughters, 2 of whom died under 2 years old. The other 2, another Allie, they did a lot of that back then, confuses things, and Carrie, both lived. Carrie appears to have died without ever marrying. The other Allie, I'm still tracking down, but I think she's the one that married, had some children, but none of them ever married. I don't know what's going on in this family. But bottom line is, here's what we know about John T. We know quite a bit. He joined Quitman's Light Brigade, I believe it was called, during the Civil War, and left within a year due to hearing loss. I guess the little cannons were too loud for him. We have guys getting their legs blown off, and he leaves because it was a little too hard on his hearing. So he got out and appears to have switched sides at some point because he was working for a clerk up in D.C. at some point. Given that Allie was from Maryland, it's not that unusual that halfway through the war they appear to have moved back. So it's not that unusual, I guess, that he worked in D.C. as a clerk of some sort. So there are a lot of letters we have by these guys, and when I get home, I'm going to read all of them. I've read a few, but I was really focusing on the ones that were talking about things affecting Holly Hedges, right? But now, I want to read them all, because I want to know about this John T. Jr. What was he up to during all of this time? I'm going to read all of his letters, because when the war was over, they stayed up north, and at some point, I've been reading around 1868, he leaves his wife and children. He doesn't get a divorce because that wasn't a thing you did back then. He just left. And I bet there's some letters telling me why he left. But we know he went to New York where he spied later. I think one reason I find this story so interesting is today we know that people get divorced for good reasons, bad reasons, whatever. But in 1860s, you just didn't. So we just assumed they stayed together, or maybe they had an affair. I don't think it occurs to us that more often, I've read articles now about it, more often than we realize, they just left. They just left and went somewhere else and started a new life, which tells me you read in the books that Allie thereafter just identified herself as a widow. But it makes me think he went up to New York and remarried a woman named Margaret, had his fifth daughter, another daughter, of course. And I'm sure he told poor Margaret that he was a widower. I'm sure he didn't say, hey, I'm on the lam. I'm not, I'm really married and have two kids at home. What a sad situation.
Ne'er-do-well, liar, and a turncoat.
And a mama's boy.
And a mama.
So when I first started looking into all of this, I was told by people in Natchez, well, we kind of lost track of John T. Jr. after 1900. I think he died in New York. So I've been doing some digging. Remember the tip I gave y'all that I learned from my friend Elizabeth Walters was use Ancestry not just for your family, but to look up any historical people you want to. It's all out there for you. So I found out he absolutely died in March 1910. And I'm sure that's taken from his gravestone. But if there's not a photo of the gravestone on Find a Grave, I feel like I need to go get that photo. Because etched in stone must be a saying that came about based on your tombstone, right? The only thing I trust the most, if your name's misspelled, they can't, and in lots of documents, names were spelled differently, dates of birth and death couldn't be agreed upon. If it's on your gravestone, that's as certain as it's going to get for me, because everybody stood around the family and nodded and agreed, yes, this is all correct, this is who he was, this is when he died. So in reality, I probably could have paid someone that works there at the cemetery to take a picture of that gravestone, but I just want to make a point. I just want John T. McMurran Jr. to know we are onto him. He did not get away with this for eternity like he thinks. All things become known in the end, right?
Coming after you, John.
That's right, Johnny boy, mama's boy. So I want to go see with my own eyes and be able to document for history, take that photo, add it to Find a Grave, create that family tree, show what he did, because poor Allie called herself a widow the rest of her life, whereas he moved on to New York, lied to everybody, and just lived a whole new life. I think he was married 25 years or more to this new Margaret, had another daughter, and just did his own thing. I've also found where he was in the 1900 census, and it was in New York, so maybe later today we can go take a picture of that, because he was renting in 1900. So we probably could have paid someone to do this, but so today, that's what we're doing before we meet up with the girls again on the move. So we're going to go track this guy down. It'll be more memorable. History is alive, guys. We learn lessons from all of this. And I'm pretty sure he kept correspondence with his mom, who was busy raising her ne'er-do-well grandson, Fozzie, after the death of his father. So we're going to learn a lot more when I get home. But today, we're going to go find him. And boy, I want to find out if his daughter, I think she was Margaret as well. I'll let you know if his daughter up here ever married. And I wonder if the family knows who he even was and about his whole secret life. Who knew in the 1800s this is what was going on? But it was. So we are driving out to his cemetery. Yeah, so many people in this family, I was looking on Ancestry, died without ever marrying or with no children. It was like something wrong with the gene pool. Why would that many people? But they did. So I don't know what that was all about. But then again, if you had daughters, let's think about this. After the Civil War, I think there was a shortage of men.
Shortage of men.
Yeah. A lot of men got killed off in the Civil War. Like 600,000.
So men would have had their pickings.
Yeah, they would. So maybe that's what was going on here. I don't know. We'll get to the bottom of that. But in the meantime, when I found where he was buried, we're going to New York City next month. I'm going to have to go find that grave and take a picture of it. The folks at Melrose may have it. Someone may have it. But it has not been forthcoming. So I'm just going to go find it on my own. Don't like to rely on anybody. So we are going about an hour, 40 minutes to an hour north of New York City in the Valhalla area to find it. I'll tell you one more thing that I've learned in all this research is, well, first of all, at LSU, they've got the McMurran and Turner family papers. I'm going to have to call them and find out if all of those letters and writings are online. I'm thinking some of them may not be. So that may require a trip to Baton Rouge, unless someone there can scan it all to me. But also I found there's apparently a cookbook written by Allie, Abandoned Allie. That's how you can remember her name. Abandoned Allie, and one of her daughters, it says, they don't say which one, wrote a cookbook that is at Michigan State, of all places. So I got to get a copy of that cookbook because there's some kind of rebel punch. There's several rebel named recipes in there, but even better, it says the daughter said one of the recipes was by her grandmother who lived at Melrose. How cool is that? So it's a nice rainy day here, but my sweetie's holding the umbrella, and Victor was super helpful and gave us the map to go find the grave. And what's really great is, I don't know if you can see it through here. Let's see if there's a little quick, I want y'all to see this beautiful 1893, I think, used to be a train depot, and it's now the offices. But this office and this cemetery has trains running through it. So this makes sense now. They said people died in Manhattan, and they put the body on the train. And let me show you over here. There's a train track.
The death train.
The death train. And I was like, okay, I was wondering, why on earth is he up here? It makes sense. Manhattan's too full to be burying people. So they brought him up to places like this in Valhalla, New York, about a 40-minute ride or so from Manhattan today. And the building is very lovely. So that's why he's buried here. So now let's go find him.
Hold on. Okay, so we are right here, and yeah, we want to go straight. We want to take that road right there. Good. So take this road. Yep, and then we're going to keep driving on this road until we come across, see a pond on our right side.
So I can tell you one thing right now, this was like an absolute scavenger hunt. Very difficult to find, but thanks to Victor, who works at the cemetery, he kept walking us, getting closer and closer into this area. And there it is, John T. McMurran. Look at this beautiful cemetery.
We found you, you ne'er-do-well.
Looky there. And sure enough, look who's here. His wife of John T. McMurran. It doesn't even say Junior on there. I think he tried to just forget his entire past. Look at that. That's it, guys. That's what we drove a long way to find. And our sweet Uber driver has waited on us. And if it weren't for Victor walking us through, and then Wes actually found it near the circle. There it is. John T. McMurran and Margaret, his second wife, who I'm quite sure doesn't know she's his second wife. So we managed to get it done, and our wonderful Uber driver, Param, was very nice to wait on us while we looked around and got grass all over our shoes. So we took them off so we don't make a mess in here. But with the help of Victor, Wes was able to find the tombstone of John T. McMurran Jr. and his wife. So it was a very successful day. Well, I guess she wasn't his legal wife, but she thought she was. So maybe that counts for her.
Yeah.
So now we're heading back to New York City, and maybe we'll go look for his apartment next, huh? My crazy partner in crime. Thanks, honey. We made it back to the room, but looking at the gravestone, we found one more thing that little stinker pulled. He was born October 1st, 1833. What does his gravestone say? 1840. He shaved a solid 7 years off of his age. He did not want to be found. He dropped the junior, because if you're a junior, that means there must be a senior, so you're giving away your dad's name. And he took 7 years off of his age. That's pretty nervy. Hey, you got to come find the actual gravestone and see it to know things like that. But we've now proved where he was buried, that he's buried with Margaret, who I believe he was married to about 35 years, a long time, that he lied about his age, about his marital status. I've made up in my mind now that he probably told her that his family was lost in the war, and the war was too painful to think about. He just couldn't talk about it. I bet he used that to get out of a lot of tough discussions. The 1910 census says he lived at 117 West 56th. He was a renter. He did not own. It's a parking garage with apparently offices above it. 117 West 56. It was literally 3/10 of a mile from our hotel, so we had to come check it out. Clearly it didn't look like that in 1900 when he was renting an apartment there, but I bet you it looked a whole lot like one of these. These look area and age appropriate, and I bet that's what was there and got torn down. So yeah, that's where he ended up, where he spent his last years. where that building now stands, and it probably looked about like that.